Welcome to ECCB Connects. ECCB Connects is produced by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank to share with you who we are, what we do, and how we serve you. This week, a legal service officer at the ECCB, Roland Moore, joins us to discuss some of the legislative aspects on credit reporting, which is intended to make accessing finance and credit easier for all of us in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. Stay with us, we'll share more with you when we get back. Roland, thanks for joining us on ECCB Connects.
Well, thanks for having me, Karina. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to be here.
Roland, you're here to discuss credit reporting in the ECCU. In fact, we've had several other guests talk about different aspects of credit reporting in the region, but today you're going to discuss with us the legislative aspects of what is going to happen or what has been happening in terms of bringing credit reporting to the people. Now, if you will, for those of our viewers who are tuning in for the first time, give us a brief overview of what credit reporting is.
What it is basically a history of a person's financial transactions with credit providers. So, for example, you may have a mortgage at a bank, for example. So it does give a history of how you have paid that particular mortgage, and also any other type of credit that you would have taken from other institutions as well.
Right. So basically looking at how a customer or data subject, as some I've heard referred to, takes care of their obligations with financial institutions and other lenders.
Precisely.
Great.
Precisely, Karina.
So why is legislation with respect to the credit reporting system in the ECCU important?
I think, first of all, a framework always has to be established in order to know exactly how to operate a credit bureau, and also what obligations the credit bureau will have, how that will be affected, how the organization will be supervised, how licenses will be given, those sorts of things. It's important so that there's a some sort of regulation in place, or regulator, so as to ensure that things are done in order, and the legislation is there for that particular order to be established.
Now, Roland, if you will, explain to us how the ECCB is involved, or the ECCB's role, rather, in furthering this legislation through the region.
The ECCB would have been partnering with the World Bank on establishing this particular project. One of the things that we would have seen is that there was a very high percentage of non-performing loans within the ECCU. And so this was just one area, for example, that needed to have some regulation in place. The ECCB, with its mandate of financial stability and its other tenants. So this was one area, as I said, that we saw that could definitely benefit from credit reporting.
The legislation, of course, then is intended to be passed, is for all of the ECCB member countries. What is the status of that at present?
We're pleased to say that the legislation has been passed in all 8 member territories. Just so to the regulations, we are only awaiting commencement in St. Lucia at this particular point in time, but everywhere else it's been passed and commenced.
And what exactly does that mean? As you said, it's been passed, it's to be commenced in one other member jurisdiction. What does that actually mean for the people of the region?
Well, Karina, it means that credit reporting is here. It's already here. It has been a conversation that has been happening for over 10 years, thereabout. But finally, we can get to say that, hey, it's actually legislated. It's in our books. It is something that we can begin establishing, and so that the people of the ECCU can finally have the benefits of credit reporting. I believe in some of the previous episodes you may have mentioned some of the benefits of credit reporting, but just to reiterate those, it could mean, I'm sure many individuals who may have wanted to access credit may have found that, it took an inordinately long time, for example, where it is that the institutions have to go and contact different institutions to find out whether or not an individual has credit with them, what their standing is, how they report, and that process in itself is time consuming both for the institution lending and also for the individual who is waiting.
Yes.
That no longer has to be a thing. It means that we can now be able to access credit reports practically in real time. And the present landscape, we see that there's basically a blanket that everybody kind of pays the same rates thereabout. But with credit reporting now, the institution is able to tailor credit towards, how responsible the individual is in terms of paying back. Because at the end of the day, that's what the institution is really concerned about. If I do give credit to this particular individual, will they pay me back?
What we've discussed in past is that the credit report would also account for how they pay their utilities and their hire purchase. So people can now use those good payment habits to leverage better payment terms with their lender.
Yes, exactly. As we would have mentioned before, then it also leads to less non-performing loans because the institutions know, okay, well, these are individuals who we can trust. These are individuals who are in a position to be able to pay us back.
Talk to us about some of the main aspects of the legislation and how it would affect the people.
So the legislation is in two parts. There's the Act itself, and then there's also the regulations. The Act itself is divided into a few parts, each dealing with specific aspects. So, for example, there are parts which deal with, for example, licensing, because we are the licensing entity for any credit bureau which comes into our space. There is presently a credit bureau which is licensed to operate within the entire ECCU, and this is Every Data.
So the ECCB does not actually carry out the process of credit reporting, but we regulate a service provider, which in this case is Every Data ECCU.
Yes, precisely, Karina. Yes, and so that particular aspect is contained within the regulations. We also have other parts which deal with, for example, supervision, and again, this is where the ECCB comes into play. Supervision, some of the powers that would deal with supervision of the licensed entity, and in this case, at present, we have the Every Data. We also have provisions that deal with things like civil liability in case any information, in case a data subject might suffer any damage or anything like that because of the credit reporting process. There's different parts that deal with different aspects of credit reporting.
A question I've gotten is, how is my information going to be kept safe? If you will, share with us what the legislation speaks to in terms of data safety.
The legislation imposes on the credit bureau the obligation to ensure that they have sufficient systems, IT systems, to ensure that the information is kept safe. There's also the requirement that the information should not be given for any purpose outside of what is regulated within the legislation itself.
And of course, I think a key part for us to mention is the fact that the information can't be shared without the consent of the person requesting credit.
Yes, precisely.
Similarly, as to when you seek credit at a bank or hire purchase, you have to complete a disclosure agreement. It's in like fashion that that information can only be shared with consent.
Yes.
So in the coming months, we're definitely going to see more activity happening in terms of credit reporting in the region, which, as you've outlined, is ultimately going to benefit the people.
Yes. The people of the ECCU being able to access better terms on their mortgages, their other credit facilities. It will be better for the licensed financial institutions as well. They themselves will be able to give better terms. They'll be able to be more efficient in their operations, and also better for the entire ECCU.
Roland, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for joining us.
And again, Karina, thanks for having me.
You're watching ECCB Connects.
And now for this week's financial tip.
Manage your debt. Establish a debt repayment plan before you take a loan. Include your monthly payments in your budget and make it a priority to pay off outstanding balances quickly.
We're at the end of this week's episode of ECCB Connects, where we've been speaking with Legal Officer in the Legal Services Department at the ECCB, Roland Moore, about some of the legislative aspects of credit reporting across the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. Roland shared that the legislation has been passed in all 8 ECCB member countries and outlined the ECCB's role as regulator to the credit service provider, Every Data ECCU. He also spoke to some of the rights of the consumer or those accessing credit as outlined in the regulations for credit reporting. To access this information, be sure to visit the ECCB's website at eccb-centralbank.org. Thanks so much for watching, and join us next week for another episode of ECCB Connects.